I want to welcome you to Preserving Health. We're going to get started tonight. I don't normally come to work in blue jeans, a flannel, and Birkenstocks. For those of you who know me very long, you know I really don't go to work like that. But I'm dressed that way tonight for a reason. Because when I'm done flapping my jaws, we're going to head outside and go to a little garden plot. And my original plan was to come earlier this week and get it all prepared so we'd be ready to go. And each time I came, it was raining. And then I thought, you know what? I'm not going to do that. Because every single one of us, if we start gardening or return to gardening, we're going to be going out to our plots of land or our raised beds or our plastic buckets or whatever, and we're going to have to prepare them, right? So then we'll do that tonight. I probably won't do the whole thing, but we'll do a little bit of it so you can get a sense if you're not familiar with how to do that and really see it's really not that hard. Like there's nothing that's hard about this. So brought a few tools, and when I got the bucket out of the car, I didn't pay attention to what was in the bucket because I asked my daughter to gather the tools for me. I said, I need a hand trowel and a hand rake and whatever. And she got them. Her kids' version. I just laughed. It made me laugh. So we're going to have a kids' garden tonight, which is kind of fun. I also brought some compost from home. We've talked a little bit about composting. We're going to talk some more next session when we talk about soil health and how to grow healthy soil. But this isn't going to last long at my house, so I brought it while it's available for you to see it. This is just scraps from the house, food scraps, grass clippings, chopped leaves, all that stuff that we put in a pile and we turn it. And after, a couple years here, it'll turn into this black, rich compost, which is really a great source of nutrients for your garden. You don't have to do this. You really don't have to do this. But if you have space, it doesn't take any time to do it. You just dump your stuff and take a rake and turn it over every so often. And it'll produce for you some really great fertilizer so you don't have to go buy it. Another thing that I intended to get for you, and I did get for you but left it at my house, was a bucket of, I just go out in the woods and I collect out in the woods underneath the trees with the shovel some of that debris, the leaves, the twigs, all of that stuff that falls down and just kind of decomposes over time. It's really great for your garden. And it's cheap, right? It's free and it's cheap, but it's great for your garden. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. Let's see. So preparing your bed. We talked a little bit about this, our first session. You want to work the soil when it's moist but not wet. Super, super, super important to not do it when it's wet. Ask me how I know. Because I didn't know, and I was so excited to garden, First year we started gardening, and I went out, and, I'm from Virginia. You start gardening in March, and not so much here. The ground was really wet, and I got it all prepared, and after it dried out, I had these clods of dirt that were rock hard, just like a rock. So you don't want your soil to be wet when you go out and start to prepare it. Moist is okay, but definitely not wet. You want to deeply aerate. So different people will tell you different things. When we first got started gardening, I think I shared with you already that we did rototill that first year. And my poor little husband was out there, rototilling the garden. We had a friend come and bring his tractor because we have a 5,000 square foot space, and I don't expect you to do that because that's a little crazy. But that first year we did rototill to kind of get down deep. You don't have to do that. It is good to go down at least a foot if you can. You want to get those big rocks out. You want to get, weeds out, all of that kind of stuff. But you want to get air into that space. Mix your compost, fertilizer, manure if you're using it. Make sure if you're using manure that it's well aged. People make a mistake with that very frequently. They will use manure that has not aged enough, and then they wonder why they're having issues in their garden. So if you're using manure, make sure that it's very well aged. What you buy in the bags should already be well aged. Yes, ma'am.
Is there I think there's a difference in manure. We had well composted or aged horse manure, and it infested our garden with weeds. Is there a difference?
So those animals which eat hay, not all hay is created equal, and which we're going to get to actually when we talk about mulching, because if you use hay in your mulching, you can get weeds as well, because hay often has weeds in it, right? Straw, not so much, some of the others. There are some people that will only use certain kinds of manure. For example, there are some gardeners who will only use chicken manure because you don't get so much of that issue, but you do really have to make sure that it's well composted. And there are different people that will say different things, but for me, I want it composted at least 3 years. It's no longer poop. It's crumbly soil like this. If it still looks like poop, smells like poop, or any of that, I don't want it in my garden, right? First of all, I don't want the bacteria that it brings. Secondly, you can run into other kinds of issues. After you have, in terms of what you're going to add to your garden, remember we talked about soil testing? I think that was last time. Your soil test is really going to drive what you add to your garden or don't add to your garden, right? I thought our first year that we were going to need to add all sorts of compost and all sorts of things, and I was ready to go, and we hardly needed anything that I had prepared. We needed things that I hadn't prepared, but our soil test kind of drives that. And it's cheap, it's easy, it's quick, and it can really be helpful to tell you what you're doing. Now, if you're planting in a bucket, I'm not so worried about that, right? If all I have is space on a porch and to have some few buckets, it's amazing how much you can grow in buckets. Don't underestimate the amount of produce that you can produce in bucket gardening. You can have 2 buckets with a trellis and have cucumbers and, what's this called? Pearl tomatoes. I'm so excited to try it. There's all sorts of things that you can have just in buckets. So if you don't have ground available to you, don't feel like you can't garden. Once you've added what you're going to add, then you want to smooth down your surface. And then we're going to plant our plants, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Mulch. You want to have your mulch ready to go. And there are different kinds of mulch. Shredded leaves and grass clippings are great. You can use those, fresh. However, if I use grass clippings, I let it sit for at least 2 weeks. There's a plethora of reasons as to why I do that. Compost improves soil quality and structure. See how this is, it's not cakey, it's not sandy, it's crumbly. That's the kind of texture that we're looking for. And I can tell you, my garden is still not there. We're still working on the health of the soil in our garden. We've got some beds that are there, but they're not all there. So just know that it takes time. And even though our garden isn't where I want it to be, we produce crazy amounts of produce. Straw is a great source. It helps to suppress weeds, moderate the soil temperature. We're going to talk more about that here in a minute. And it helps to retain moisture. Hay. Hay is not bad, but be careful because of the weeds that can often be in hay. It can introduce those weeds into your garden, and that is just not a good time. done that before too, because we're an equestrian family. So part of our manure is chicken manure and horse manure. And we used hay because we had hay for the horses, and I didn't have a concept that that was going to introduce weeds into our garden. And it was interesting because I noticed with the horses that they really preferred hay from a certain farmer and less preferred hay from a different farmer. And since they less preferred the hay from the other farmer, that's what I used in the garden, because you bought the hay, right? Well, there's a reason they didn't like the hay from the farmer. So lesson learned on that one.
What about using wood chips?
So you can use wood chips. Lots of people do. I'm not a fan, and I'll tell you why. It takes a long time for them to decompose. And I like something that's going to decompose and turn into soil quicker. And depending upon the wood, it can be a little bit acidic. So I use lots of wood chips in my garden, but I use them in the walkways, not in the actual beds. And then when they have decomposed in the walkway, I use my handy little shovel and I take it out of the walkway and put it in the garden, and then add more.
Do you move the walkway from one place to the other each year?
I don't.
I just wanted, okay, so you keep it the same walkway?
Yep, it's set. What I do move each year are the crops. So my beds are set, but what I plant where changes every year, and I keep track of it, because where I planted my tomatoes last year, I don't want to plant tomatoes there this year. I rotate what I'm doing. Why? Because of the soil health. Plants are taking things from the soil and they're adding things to the soil. And so I rotate so that we're getting the benefit of all of that, because we're really dealing with an ecosystem, right? An ecosystem. And so I'm rotating those crops, much like a large-scale farmer does, if they're doing more organic or sustainable farming. These farms and gardeners who kind of grow the same thing year after year after year in the exact same place, they're having to add fertilizers and all sorts of things to their ground because their ground is not being fed. The plants that they're planting are extracting the nutrients that they need. If there's nothing that puts those nutrients back into the ground, if there's not a plant that puts those nutrients back into the ground, then they have to artificially add those nutrients. So by rotating your crops, you're able to use plant material to put those nutrients into the ground. Does that make sense? Yep. It also helps with pest control, which is kind of fun. We'll talk about that.
Cheryl, if you have a small plot though, let's say like this size garden, would you still rotate?
I do, because that's Yep, that's what I started with, just a tiny little thing. In the house that we had before, we had a backyard, and half the backyard was taken up with the septic system. Well, you can't plant a garden on top of your septic system, or you shouldn't. So to the left of that, we had a tiny little spot, but I would rotate what I did where every year. All right, so when to plant in Brunswick, right here in Brunswick. In March to April. If it's dry enough, go ahead and prepare your garden beds and direct sow cold, hardy crops, okay? In March, you're not so much going to get that here, but you can start to get there in April here. Yes, ma'am?
Just back to composting. Do you mow your grass and put the grass clippings in your compost pile?
We should do that.
Or do you find it gets weedy if you leave it?
No. We do that on occasion. To be honest, when I mow my grass, it's in between everything else that I have to do in life. So I just mow right over those grass clippings and leave them in the backyard. Our front yard is mostly a garden, so I don't mow out there. It is a garden, a flower garden, so I'm not dealing with that. When I do grass clippings, I will mow in such a way that those clippings are in a row, and then I'll take the wheelbarrow and scoop them up and dump them into the compost. I don't get weeds because I let them really decompose for a lengthy period of time. Same with leaves. If I use leaves in my compost, or if I use leaves as a mulch, I go over them with a lawnmower, which I know sounds crazy, but if you use the whole leaf, it takes so much longer for it to decompose. If you chop them up, and I have a friend who literally chops them up, I would lose my mind. So I just, my husband will get the blower out, and I run over them with the lawnmower, and we call it good. So in March and April, you're starting your indoor plants. Now, confession, when we left here last time, we did seed blocking, right? And I wanted to bring the tray for you tonight, and it's sitting right next to that bucket of stuff that I also left. Because when I got home that night, I finished all the seed blocking. I finished it all, and I planted peppers and tomatoes in it. And the purpose of doing it that night was because I wanted the plants big enough for us to plant tonight, right? Well, I got the seed blocking done, and I got a few seeds done. I didn't get the rest of the seeds in, and I actually didn't get the rest of the seeds in until Sunday a week ago. But when I had to do some unexpected traveling, and the person that stayed at the house, I told them, these are seed blocks, so when you water them from the bottom. And she is just a dear, and she forgot, and she did a fantastic job watering them. Fantastic from the top. I have a tray of just muddled, because if you water those seed blocks from the top, they'll fall apart, right? And it'll be fine. It'll be totally fine. But just take home message. Make sure if you do seed blocking that you're watering it from the bottom. And how do you do that? You just put water around the sides, around the perimeter, and it'll soak right through the bottom. You don't have to do something special. Yes,
Carol, what is seed blocking?
okay, so this is not really a seed blocker, but kinda. You'll get your soil, and you'll add water to it to the point that it's like brownie batter. You don't want it sopping wet. I don't want to squeeze it and have water come out. But you think of sort of almost like a brownie batter, maybe a little drier than that, but you want to make sure it's good and moist. And then there's a contraption. And it's a lot like this. The one that I have has 5, and it's squares. It's 2 by 2 inch squares. And there's a handle. And what I do is I have a bin, just a plastic bin, and I put my soil in. I add the water and mix it up with my hands, and then I put that implement in, and I make sure that that dirt is packed really securely into that tool. And then I lift it, and I put it on a regular tray like you see seedlings that have been started. I put it in a tray, and you push the little handle, and those 2 by 2 blocks will come out. And so then instead of starting my plants in a bunch of those little plastic gizmos and having to deal with getting them out and having to deal with the root bound at the bottom, and the roots are coming out the bottom, that kind of stuff, it air prunes them so that as that little plant grows and the roots get out to the edge, the air kind of communicates with that and says, okay, well, wait a minute, you've kind of reached the limit of your boundary here, right? And when you plant those then in your garden, they tend to be more robust, and they tend to withstand elemental challenges better than if I do this. And I'm not having to store these little plastic containers, and I'm not having to deal with microplastics. And I'm not having to buy more because these things are flimsy, right? It's just truly little blocks of dirt. But you do have to make sure that they're watered from the bottom, because if you water from the top, they'll just kind of fall apart.
Can I ask you?
Yes.
After our class last time,
Yes.
I went to Fedco, I found Fedco, and I bought one of those seed blocks.
Okay.
It was $48, which I thought, oh my God, this is ridiculous.
You got a nice one.
Well, it's gonna last me the rest of my life.
Yes.
So figured, okay.
It
it'll be
will.
okay. Anyway, soon after that, I was looking at Temu. Are you familiar
Yeah.
with Temu? That's, it's like Amazon, but you're buying, it's coming from China, I think.
Yeah.
Although their headquarters is apparently in Boston. Anyway, I saw the same one. It had 4 sections
Yeah.
to it. That was $12. So I haven't bought that, but
Yeah.
but I actually did buy something else, and I wanted to ask your opinion on it.
Yeah.
So I got these little seed. It is a little packet of seed things like this,
Mhm.
and I put a seed in each one. I had a tray. I have a tray that was about 100 of them, I think.
Yeah.
And I put a seed in each one, and within about 3 days, the lettuce was starting to come up. And I thought, oh my gosh, maybe this is amazing. Do you know anything about these?
Do you know what that's made out
I
of?
have no idea. It's probably something really bad, is it? Okay, yeah.
So there's different-
That's why I brought it.
There's different kinds. A big one that's used in that genre is made from coconut fibers. And one of the challenges is lead in the coconut fibers. And I have no idea how the lead is getting in there. And there was another heavy metal. I don't remember. I went to several places here before the last session when I showed you the one that we put in the water. And it sent you to this website because it was a Prop 65 warning on it. Prop 65 is a California-based legislative rule where they try to make sure that you are an informed consumer as it relates to certain environmental toxins. So there was this Prop 65 warning on this stuff, but it didn't tell you what it was for, and it sent you to a website, and when you went to the website, it gave you no information. So I don't know. Anyway, so that is the seed blocking. It's literally where you are compacting dirt in some kind of a gizmo, so that you're avoiding this. It tends to make your plants more robust, and it's way cheaper. I think I spent like $30 on mine, and it has a little dibble in it so that it creates a little hole for you to put your seed in, and I've had it forever and a half. Okay, so in May, which here we are, this is the main planting month. So we're planting most everything in May. We do want to wait until after the last frost. And I learned the hard way that we can have a frost in May. So I normally put my garden in after Memorial Day. That's when I put most everything in. I will put some things in earlier, like now already I have lettuce growing because lettuce does come up in like 3 days. It starts shooting up and I can be eating lettuce, salads and sandwiches by Memorial Day. But for most of my regular planting, you're also going to transplant your seedlings like your peppers and tomatoes, and then you're going to start your later season crops. So there may be some crops that you want to have like in the fall, that you want to harvest in the fall. Like I like spring kale. I much prefer fall kale. Kale is sweetest after a frost. I much prefer kale after a frost. So you can play with that. Come June, you can continue planting your salad greens, and then you're going to plant crops like eggplant, because eggplant really does need warmer temperatures usually. You can still plant or continue planting your tomatoes, carrots, and beets. A couple years ago, I did not get my garden in until July. Bumper crop of tomatoes, and I did not start them. I had to direct seed them, and I thought, I'm going to get nothing. But I have these seeds, I may as well put them in the ground. And there were parts of my garden where literally I went like this. because, here we go. Bumper crop of tomatoes. Fall was later that year. We were still getting tomatoes in early October. So considerations. Wait until the last frost to plant those warm weather crops. Wait until your soil temps are around 60 degrees before planting most crops. Now, most of your gardening magazine literature is going to say 50 to 70 degrees. So you cut it in the middle and say 60. Can you start it at 50? Absolutely. But you're going to maybe have a little bit more success if you just wait until it's a little bit warmer. And when you get a series of days like we had today, it doesn't take long to get that ground up there. There's a website. Consult the Maine Vegetable Planting Chart from the University of Maine Cooperative Extension. So if you literally just Google Maine Vegetable Planting Chart, it's a neat little chart, and it's by town or zip code. So you can put in Brunswick, Maine, and it'll tell you what to plant when, what to start when, which is kind of helpful. So that's through the University of Maine Cooperative Extension. How deep to plant? So Elliott Coleman recommends planting seeds at a depth of 3 to 4 times the size of the seed. So if you've got an itty bitty little seed, 1/4 of an inch, right? If you've got a bigger seed, it could be 3/4 of an inch to an inch. We're not talking feet, right? My sister, bless her heart, she's awesome. I love her. But she's about as blonde can be. Honestly, we were both towheads coming up, and mine turned gray. And I like to think that maybe I learned something along the way. She's still very blonde. 3 feet she planted a tomato seed. 3 feet, a tomato seed. And we couldn't understand why the thing didn't come. Well, I had sent her some articles about different ways of planting, and one was a particular method for planting deep-rooted things, particularly like certain kinds of trees and bushes and that sort of thing. And she knew that there are some tomatoes that can have deep roots. So that sucker went in 3 feet deep. She never did get any tomatoes. She now knows. But, those are the things we all make mistakes. We all learn. Every single year we're learning and growing. And I'm so grateful for that. Let's see. Okay, how to plant. Did I finish that? Yeah, how to plant. So for our seedlings, we want to gently ease them apart. Now, if you're getting them out of this kind of thing, I like to moisten them first because I find that they come out easier that way. If I am using my seed block, tray, you literally just lift it up. I mean, it's so easy. But you want to gently ease them apart because sometimes their little roots can kind of make friends, and you don't want to just go ripping them apart, right? Because that's traumatic. And just ease them apart. Survival of the fittest. Just because you planted or started a tray of tomatoes or peppers or whatever doesn't mean that you actually have to plant them all, right? If you've got, some that are wimpy and not looking so hot, why bother planting it? When I plant mine in my little gizmos, I will usually plant 2. And I will, whichever one seems the most hardy and robust, that's the one that goes in my ground. The other one goes in my compost. All right? And I can tell you, we've gotten some pretty fun tomatoes out of our compost, actually. They ended up growing and producing. Yes, ma'am?
You mean when you do the seed blocking, you're putting 2 seeds in one of those?
I usually do. Yep. So whichever one is the hardiest, and if they're both hardy, well, then they both get planted. But just because I planted over 100, I don't know who does that, tomato plants, because I started 100 tomato plants doesn't mean I'm going to plant 100 tomato plants. I'll probably end up planting 75. Does that make sense? Okay. Open a hole deep enough to accommodate the seedling at the same depth that was growing in its previous container. So, because we're going to plant flowers tonight instead of vegetables for the staff to be able to enjoy, it would be the same if it was a tomato plant, right? This is how deep this thing is. So I'm going to open a hole tonight when we go out there that's at least that deep, right, to plant this in. I'm not going to open a hole half as deep and have half of it sticking up out of the ground, right? I'm going to open the hole for the entire depth. Same for the pot, same for my seed blocks, whatever it is. Consult the seed package for spacing. Most of your reputable seed companies, on the back of the packaging, some of the Fedco ones, it's on the front of the packaging, it will tell you about your spacing, how far apart they need to be. Now, I have a daughter who's very precise, and she has a tool that she created out of popsicle sticks, and she has it marked. And she will go and make sure, no, Mommy, it's supposed to be here. You know, when she was little, it was really I'm like, okay, honey, can we just get them in? No, it has to go here. We've kind of grown a little bit beyond that, but I'm not that precise. But by and large, once you get to doing it enough, you can kind of eyeball it. But if you're not sure at first, by all means, take a little ruler out there if you need to. That's not a problem. But that seed package will tell you how far apart it needs to be. After you plant it, you want to firm the soil down. So what I normally do, if it's a small area, I just use a trowel. And I'll open up a little area, put it in, cover it back, and then I will just tamp it down. I'm not banging it. I'm not pushing it. I'm not making it rock hard, but I do want to firm it a bit. For seeds, I'm going to open the ground. For me, I normally will open a row. I'm not making 75 different little holes, right? I'm just going to open a row. I'll use a tool to do that. And then I drop the seeds in at whatever spacing I'm doing, and then I cover that back up. Place the seed at whatever depth you're planting for, and then again firm the soil, and then gently water. A mistake that a lot of people make is they water way, way, way too much. So much, and they drown these little seeds, and then they wonder why they don't come up. Or they come up and they're, you want to water them, moisten them, but you don't want to drown them, right? Succession planting. This is so fun. For continual harvest, plant crops in staggered intervals. For example, you get a package of lettuce seeds. These seeds are itty-bitty tiny, and it's very tempting just to plant them all, right? Well, then all your lettuce is coming up at the same time. I like salads, but wow, there's only so much salad I want to eat, right? But if you plant a few of them and then wait until the next week or the following week and plant a few more, and then wait another week or two and plant a few more, then your lettuce is coming in waves, right? So I'm growing what I can handle and what I can eat and enjoy. And then as that's coming to an end, well, I've got a whole new crop coming up. And so I'm gathering and I'm harvesting this all throughout the summer as opposed to 3 weeks and done, right? So that is succession planting. Consider days to maturity for each crop to determine planting intervals. That means when you buy seeds from a reputable company, most of them are going to tell you the days to maturity. It could be 60, it could be 50, it could be 90, it could be whatever, right? Depending upon what you're planting. You want to think about our weather and what's going to be, sort of that frost. When is the frost coming? And back it up from there. And then that's going to be sort of the last time that you want to plant, right? But I can back it up even further. So in my tomatoes, because we go wild with tomatoes, I don't put them all in at the exact same time. I will put a fair number of them in, and then I'll wait 2-3 weeks, and then I'll put a fair number more in, because I don't want to spend my whole summer canning and drying my food. It's hot, and I want to be outside doing something fun, not in my kitchen, laboring all summer, trying to deal with all this stuff that I grew in the garden, right? So if I kind of have it coming in waves, then that first wave, that's manageable. I can take care of that. And then there's the second wave, and it's manageable, as opposed to, oh my goodness, I've got 300 pounds of tomatoes. Now what am I going to do? Plant seeds of the same crop every 2 to 3 weeks. And also think about quick growing things like radishes, turnips, leafy greens, peas. Some of these things will grow and then they're done. Well, then there's space in my garden. What am I going to do with that? It's just empty space. I could succession plant a completely different species into that space, right? I frequently do this with herbs. Cilantro comes on fast and furious. And so I can plant a little piece of cilantro here, and it'll come right up and I can enjoy it. And when that's done, well, then I can plant something else in that exact same spot. All right? So that is a different type of succession planting. Companion planting. Love it. Pair plants to benefit like things like pest control, enhanced growth, nutrient exchange. For example, basil and tomato. The basil scent repels pests like aphids, while tomatoes provide shade for heat-sensitive plants like basil. You know, because tomatoes grow up, right? And there's going to be shade on one side of that. And so you can plant your shades. Same with corn. You know, corn is tall, and if I need something that's more shady, because our garden, it's all sun all the time. There's nothing around to provide shade. So if I need something that needs a little bit of shade, I need to use a plant to do that. Things like marigold. I love marigolds. These are awesome. These are awesome. They're awesome for lots of different reasons. One, deer don't like them. And so I will plant them on the perimeter of my garden. The whole perimeter gets marigolds around it. And then within some of those beds, there will also be marigolds. And you can use the blossoms. I put them in some of the salves and creams that I make. There's no need to go buy them, these blossoms. You can grow your own. And while you're enjoying the beautiful color, and there are different colors of them, they can be used for some pretty fun purposes. We should do a class on that, how to make your own hand cream and face cream. In fact, the only thing that goes on my face is what I make. That may scare you, but you can grow your own stuff, and it's pretty awesome. But marigolds are great for deterring not just deer, but other kinds of pests. Garlic and roses. Garlic is great for roses. It just goes on and on. Dill will repel cucumber beetles. Who knew? So your companion planting is really fun. Marigolds, like I said, are one of my favorites. A garden is happiest when there is diversity, airflow, and sunlight. Use plants vertical height to create shade for heat-sensitive crops, all right? Use herbs to deter pests or to attract them. There are some herbs that attract insects that are healthy for our garden, right? So that's a whole class by itself, frankly. And easily Google. And like nasturtiums and cucumbers and strawberries, well, nasturtiums are beautiful in a salad. So not only are they beautiful to look at, but you can eat them. That's kind of fun, too. Watering. I prefer to water in the morning to minimize challenges that can arise from later in the day, such as evaporation or scorching, People don't realize they can scorch their plants, but they can. You know, when we first moved here to Maine, we didn't have an air conditioner. I didn't know anyone who had an air conditioner in their house. And now I'm turning all the air conditioners on, you know, in the house. Our summers are getting hotter, it's true. Well, our plants feel that as well. And a lot of people, not realizing it, can go and water from the top and scorch their plants if they're watering during the heat of the day. So by watering in the morning, it reduces the risk of fungal diseases. Evening watering can lead to wet foliage, making it susceptible to insects and disease. Midday watering, rapid evaporation, the scorching I mentioned. You want to water deeply and less frequently to encourage root growth. When we first started gardening, we didn't know. I didn't know. So I would just go out there every day and, you know, spray the garden. I thought I was doing a good thing, not realizing that I wasn't. I was spraying the top of the plants as opposed to the roots, all right? Because the top of the plants really aren't using that much water. They get rained on when it rains, right? It's the bottom of the plant down where the root is. The root is what needs the water, right? So we want to water those roots. So now when we water, I'll either use a can and go, or I'll use my watering hose with a little gentle sprayer on the bottom. And we have not gotten watering tape yet, but that's on the, maybe my Mother's Day list. I don't know. We'll see. What I'm wanting to do is put in a watering system, just because it's so much easier. As our garden grows, my wish list grows. And so there is this watering system where it has little holes in tape, and you lay it along the root line of your vegetables, and you turn your faucet on, just gentle, and it'll gently just water right there, and I don't have to do a thing, right, except turn the water spigot on. I don't have that yet. So I'm literally going down the row, but I'm not going from the top anymore. It's truly down at the bottom, all right? And if you have mulched, you've got mulch around your plants, that mulch is going to help to retain that moisture so you're not having to water as often. Another thing that mulch is going to do is it's going to help to cut down on your weeds, all right, which is a good thing as well. Check the moisture of the ground several inches down before watering, because a lot of people think, oh, I just got to water my garden every day, and they don't realize that they're over-watering. And so like cucumbers, you can just water the flavor right out of cucumbers. You've got this whole beautiful cucumber. It doesn't taste like anything because I watered the flavor out, right? If you don't water them enough, they'll get bitter. But if you water them too much, they're not very flavorful. Yes, ma'am? So I will use grass clippings, chopped leaves. Frequently the chopped leaves. I'll go out into the woods and sort of gather what's out there underneath the trees. So for mulch, we've got compost that we can use. Straw is a good one. Some people do use wood chips. I'm not a fan, but a lot of people do use wood chips for mulching. Pine needles. Now, pine needles can be kind of acidic, so you want to be careful with that. Your soil test will tell you what the pH of your soil is, and it will make suggestions to you on what kind of mulch would be helpful to use. Yes, ma'am? Yeah, so I have used seaweed. Seaweed is fantastic. You do have to be careful with the sodium level in it. So when I use seaweed, I will wash it first. Some people will just put it right on. I don't do that. I have a friend. Did any of you know Ed Webster? Ed Webster. He was a Mount Everest climber. Super, super nice guy. An amazing gardener, absolutely amazing gardener. He died a couple years ago, but he would just go to the ocean and get bucket after bucket of seaweed and he would put it all around his plants, and he wouldn't really water it. He would soak it in he wouldn't wash it. He would soak it and get it good and wet, because it dries out a bit on the way home. But he would put it, but there were some plants that he wouldn't put it straight on. He'd put it more around it, or he would soak it in fresh water and then pull it out. But seaweed is a great thing. And the Indians, when they planted their corn, not just corn, some kinds of beans as well, they would get fish and chop the fish up, and in the hole would go a fish or a piece of fish. And they would cover that right up. All right, so you're going to check the moisture of your ground. Avoid overwatering, which can lead to root rot and other problems. When Dan and I lived in the country of Yemen, it used to drive me nuts. And I didn't know much about gardening back then, but I knew enough that I knew this wasn't good. They had real water issues. They did not have enough water for their people to drink. Babies would die every single year, every single month from dehydration, right? Literally die from not having enough water. But they chew this thing called khat. It's, people smoke weed here. Over there they chew khat. And it's this leaf, and they get a little bit of a hallucinogenic effect, and it's prolifically used all over the country. And almost every day, they will just turn on the faucets and flood their khat fields. Well, Yemen is in the Middle East. Like, I didn't know a place could get that hot. Like, I had never experienced heat like I experienced it there. They are cold at 90 degrees. They're wearing blankets at 90 degrees. 120 with 100% humidity is not uncommon. And they would just flood these fields. And of course, most of the water, was evaporated. That's not what we want to do. We really want to think about how we're watering so that we are nurturing our plant, nurturing our soil, but also being mindful of our resources, right? So we want to take care of what we're doing. I do want to get drip irrigation. I've not made that investment yet, but that's on my to-do list. And back to the mulching, because it really does reduce the frequency of watering, all right? Gardening takes time, but it doesn't have to take forever. And if we learn those tricks of the trade like mulching, then it can really shorten the amount of time. We do want to adjust for soil type. So sandy soil will require more frequent watering. Clay soil will require less frequent watering. Why? Because that sandy soil is very loose and the water just goes right on through, versus the clay is more compact, right? All right. Thinning. Prevent the need for thinning as much as possible by sowing seeds based on the package directions. Right? That package will tell you how to do it. But the reality is sometimes we do need to thin. Things can grow more than we think it does, or maybe we thought we were supposed to space it this much and later learned we were supposed to space it that much. Whatever. There are times when we do need to thin. Thin the end of May or early June in Maine after seedlings have developed their first few true leaves. All right? Once a plant has become well established, if you try to thin it then, several things can happen. Its roots can be intermingled with other plants near it, and you pull it out and, the plant next to it comes out. Also, if you thin, when I take this plant, if I choose to thin by extracting, when I take this plant out, it can be traumatized. Whereas if I'm careful with what I'm doing, I can take this plant out and plant it somewhere else instead of losing the plant. Does that make sense? Another way of thinning is to just take some really sharp scissors and cut it off right at the soil line. Don't wait too long. If seedlings are crowded or are competing for space, they may become stunted and permanently weaker. So another reason to thin if you need to. You don't want it to, again, that package direction will tell you, select the longest, healthiest seedlings to keep and remove the weaker ones. We talked about snipping them. Thin when soil is moist, as you're less likely to damage the plant. I have seen people go and just start yanking, plants out of the ground when the ground is dry, and it just wreaks havoc in your garden. So moisten that dirt, and the plants will come out more easily. Consider thinning in the evening so seedlings can recover and avoid sun scorch, all right? Some people will thin in the morning. I do like to try to thin in the evening. Then I can replant those, and they have a time to kind of settle overnight before that bright sun comes out the next day. You do want to water after you thin. Make sure you water, because everything's like, wait a minute, what just happened? Give it a drink. When we've had a stressful day, we like a little drink of water. Make sure it's water. Compost the thinned seedlings, or eat the edible ones like salt, lettuce, and beet greens. Those are microgreens, right? As they're just coming right up, you pay a whole lot of money for microgreens when you go to the grocery store. Well, you just grew your own microgreens. Eat them, enjoy them. You don't have to just throw them away. And speaking of microgreens, it's a fun thing to do if you've never done it. You can do it right on your kitchen counter. Just have a tray. It could even be like a cookie sheet. It doesn't have to be anything special. Put some dirt and spread some of those seeds over it, cover it lightly, and give it a little spritz of water. And within days, you're going to have microgreens that you'd have to pay big bucks for if you went to the grocery store. Well, you got it right there on your counter, and if you trim them well, they'll come right back up. You can usually get 2, sometimes 3, crops. Deadheading, what is it? It's removing the spent flowers, flower stems. It encourages new growth. It improves plant health and promotes more blossoms and fruit production. So, to deadhead, you can do it. You do it to vegetables, but you also do it to certain kinds of flowers. This is one of them. See how this one's dead? I'm just going to pop it off. It just comes right off, and what that does is it's going to encourage another blossom to come in its place. So it'll make your flowers more beautiful if you've got flowers growing somewhere, if you'll deadhead them. Now this one is starting to get a little puny, but it's not shriveled yet. I don't want to deadhead it until it's kind of shriveled up, right? I could, but it would be a little bit traumatic. You can deadhead like your cucumbers, other kinds of things, anything where there was a blossom. If you just take that blossom off, then the plant is not having to send energy trying to keep that part of it alive or to try to make that part healthy, right? If you just take that dead part off, then it helps to encourage the health of the plant. Cut the flower stems below the flower head. Make sure you use clean, sharp pruners or scissors, all right? I don't. I literally just, but I'm not like fighting it. I'll just take my fingernail and I do it like that. But you can use scissors or whatever. It is helpful to cut at a 45-degree angle if you're going to use scissors, because what's going to happen is that plant is going to send, it's kind of like when we get cut. When we get cut, our body's like, whoa, there's a cut. I need to heal that, right? Well, a plant's kind of the same way. Whoa, I got cut. I need to heal that. And we don't want stuff dripping into it and making the plant sick or out of it or whatever. Weeding, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound to cure. So trying to prevent weeds. How do you do that? Focus on your soil health, and that's what our next session is all about, soil health. Okay, the healthier the soil, the healthier the plant, the more nutrient dense the plant and the fruit will be of that plant, right? Because if we're going to spend all this time, energy, effort, and money growing a garden, we want as many nutrients out of that as we can get. I don't want just a tomato. I want a tomato that tastes good, that looks good, and it's jam-packed full of nutrients, right? That's what I want. So by taking care of your soil, you're going to do that. And by taking care of your soil, you're going to have less weeds. Mulching helps to prevent weeds. Why? That's right. It won't let them come up. The weeds need sunlight, or most of them need sunlight in order to be able to come up. And if they don't have access to sunlight, they don't really come up. Well, your mulch is covering that ground. Another thing, which we're going to talk about when we head outside, is how we plant. A lot of people plant in such a way that there's all this space between their rows, lots of space between their rows. Well, the more foliar coverage you have, the more space my plant is taking, the less sunlight is going to reach that dirt, right? And then if I have mulch around that, then even more, right? So we'll talk about that a little bit more outside. So soil has plenty of foliar covering the dirt. Focus on soil health, we talked about that. And check the garden regularly for weeds so they can be taken care of early before they have a chance to get large and spread. Now, my little husband, bless his heart, last summer he was so excited. He bought this thing, I forget what you call it, but it's basically every man's dream. It's like a flamethrower that you use in your garden, right? And you go and you torch them. And he was so excited. He went around the garden torching all these weeds, you know, and they all came back. You know, I felt so bad for him. He's such a sweetheart of a guy. I hope you get to meet him. And what we later learned was they're fantastic at keeping the weeds away, but you got to use them right now. Like when those weeds are itty bitty babies. If you go and you torch them now, they won't come back. But just like bad habits, the more you do them, the harder it is to get over them. It's the same with weeds. Weeds are like bad habits. The longer you let them stay there, the harder they are to deal with. So by really focusing on our soil health, mulching, we're going to reduce the amount of weeds that even show up. And if we're paying attention to our garden and we're getting the few weeds out that come, and it's not that big a deal. Versus me, a few years ago, we planted this beautiful garden, and I know this sounds crazy, but we'll plant, and my daughter and I will stand at the end of the row, and we have a prayer over what we just planted, because when we plant a garden, it's not just for us, it's for our neighbors, it's for friends, we like to share things, right? So, and we started a little ministry just within our family of, you know, how you see the beggars out on the street. Well, if I have a pint of tomatoes, in the summer we try to keep something in the car, and you know, there's a pint of organic tomatoes for you. It's kind of fun. And so we planted this big, lots of stuff going on, and then lots of stuff went on. Life just happened in a really, really, really big way that summer for us. And we planted the garden, we had no time to tend it. When we finally came up for air, you could not see our squash. I mean, the weeds were as high as my waist. I literally went out there crawling on my hands and knees, just grabbing the weeds to find the cucumbers, it was just ridiculous. The amount of weeds was crazy. And of course, they were really well established, right? So I had to deal with that the next year as well. And we finally got on top of it, but it was amazing to me how quickly these things can grab a hold and just proliferate. You think it'd be your tomatoes and cucumbers that proliferate. Yeah, no, it's the weeds. So again, soil health and mulch will go a long ways. If we had mulched, which we didn't, we put the garden in and then we flew the coop, had we mulched, we would not have had nearly as many weeds as we did, but we grew a great crop of weeds that summer and a few tomatoes and cucumbers. All right, any questions about anything that I've shared so far? Okay, so for those of you who are brave, follow me outside. Okay, welcome to the garden, sort of garden, to our little raised bed here. As I mentioned in class, my original plan was to come out and prepare this so that we'd be all ready to get the plants in. But then I second guessed myself and said, no, let's deal with the weeds and stuff that are there, because that's what we're dealing with in real life, right? When I looked outside this morning, for really the first time, honestly, this season in our garden, I almost choked. Things have come up really quickly. I wasn't expecting them to have come up quite that quickly. This kind of looks like my garden right now, so welcome to real life, right? So when I do this, there's different ways of doing it. I tend to not compost my weeds. Some people will compost their weeds, and you can compost your weeds. I don't have time to deal with it, and I don't even want to think about it. So when I weed, I will usually, pull it up if it will come, and I try to take it by its roots, like that. And when I get a clod of the root, I'll try to leave that nice rich dirt. And I will typically have a bucket beside me, and I will just drop those weeds in the bucket, because critters that live on our property really enjoy eating the weeds. The chickens, the goats, it just depends on what the weed is, but the chickens really do like it. So I will literally just, get a fair bit of it up with my hands. This is really quite, has gotten a nice good start on it. So I'm not gonna get all those roots, and I wanna get those roots. So the reason I won't use the shovel is because in this nice rich soil, there's an ecosystem that I don't want to disturb. I don't want to disturb the earthworms. I don't want to disturb all that good bacteria that is going to nourish and nurture my plants. But what I will use is like a little garden rake. So my daughter's baby rake wasn't so bad, right? Kind of good. And I will go down and I'll get it up that way. Does that make sense? And you can go through, and I'm getting the whole thing, and I just dump it right in. Does that make sense? I just go through, and that way I'm just disturbing. Ooh, that one's deep. That first little bit. I'm not going down or chopping up earthworms or any of that stuff. I'm just gonna aerate that area. And for the sake of time, I'm just gonna do this little spot here, okay? Because you don't need or want to watch me do this whole thing. Do what's that? I do. And let's see, there's an earthworm right there. See? If I were to use my shovel, I would have chopped him right in half. And that would make both he and me sad.
So Cheryl, do snakes bother you?
Does what bother me?
Snakes bother you?
I've never met a snake yet that I like. Yeah, no, I don't do snakes. But we have a rock wall. We have like a fire pit area, and there's a rock wall there, and there's some cracks in that rock wall, and we have an Australian Shepherd, and that dog will come out and go nuts around that rock wall, because I know for a fact there are snakes in there. So I don't sit too close to the rock wall. But I did encounter, probably a couple years ago, I encountered a couple snakes mating, and they met their demise doing their thing. One,
For the garden, but
yeah, they're not good for me. They're not good for me. I just relieved them of their heads, and they died very happy. They did. So, for the marigolds, what I do around the perimeter of my garden, this one's, obviously well grown. I direct seed. So I literally will just create a trench. So you saw that I didn't get out all the weeds, but I got out most of them. For the sake of time, we'll call it good. For the marigolds, I will literally, along the perimeter of my bed, I will just make a trench like that. And I drop the seeds right in. And then I will take my trowel and just cover it up, tap it down a little bit, and water it. And that's all there is to
Do
it.
you need to put up a fence as well?
I don't.
You don't, and that keeps them out? Really?
Yeah, yep. Now my husband did eventually put up a fence around our garden to keep the goats out. Not the deer, the goats. They are demons, little Houdinis. They'll get out of their enclosure just to get into the garden. And so that's what I do. But for the purposes of tonight, you know, I'm just gonna dig a little hole here. And remember, we're going the depth of our pot, right? Of what it's been in. So there we go. Now this has already been moistened, so I'm gonna pull it right out. If it had not been moistened, then I would put a little water on it. Now see all those roots there? See how it was getting root bound? The roots were starting to come out the bottom. That is what your seed blocking will prevent. When we seed block, it's going to do what we call air prune. And that means instead of me having to worry about all this root bound business, the air is going to take care of it, all right? This one wasn't terrible, but you can see that it's starting, right? So, no, I'm just going to put it right in this hole there. I'm going to fill that hole in. And I'm going to tamp it down. And there we go. And I would...
When you have all your blocks in a tray, do the roots not go to the next plant?
Not much.
Okay.
You will get
separated a little bit?
Yep.
Okay.
You will get a little bit of that, but if you moisten the soil and take them out gently, they'll come right out. Yep, not a problem. And they do tend to be more robust in that way. So I will have calendula or marigolds, you know, every so often. And they add beauty to your garden. They add color. Again, you can use those blossoms. And if you guys are interested, we can do a class on how to make lotions and potions and use some of the things that we grow in the garden. And then for my vegetables, again, it depends on what I'm growing. But, you know, if I'm direct seeding something, I literally just make a trench and I'll drop my seeds in just like I do the calendula. Now for corn, I like to make a hill. What is that? That's literally where I make a hill, right? And you can do a better job than that, but you get the point, right? And then I'll put my little seed there and cover it up. And I'll actually make more of a hill than that, but you get the idea. So instead of having a long trench, I'm making a series of hills that go by. Some vegetables do better in hills for several reasons. One, it creates more depth. Who asked me that question? Yeah, it creates more depth. So instead of starting down here, I'm starting up here, right? It has more depth. It can help some plants, especially if you companion plant. So like with corn, you've heard of the three sisters. It adds more depth and volume to be able to do that better. There's a whole host of reasons for healing, and each species, again, if you look at that package, some of them, your more reputable seed companies, if it prefers to grow in a hill, it will tell you that right on the package. Some of it is your own experience. So for me, I know that on our property, in our dirt, we don't grow corn very well because we are still working on our soil health, right? At least we don't, that's not true. We grow corn well, just not the kind of corn I want to eat. So the kind I want to eat, we haven't grown well yet. But as I've learned and tried to research it a little bit, it didn't tell me on the package, but in researching it, it said, you know, if you have trouble, try growing it in a hill. So we did, and great corn. Who knew? Which brings me to the compost. So when I am planting, and I open up that trench, we'll just say it's a trench for tonight. I'm opening up that trench. I will put in whatever it is that I want to add where I'm planting. I won't put it in the whole trench because we work really hard making compost and I don't want to waste it, right? So I will take a little bit of compost. Obviously this isn't a seed, this would be a transplant. I'm gonna worm its way out of here. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to dig a hole that deep, right? There we go. And in that hole, I'm going to put some of my compost. Now I do use worm castings. My husband came home with a bin of worms a few years ago, almost threw up. There was going to be worms in my house all winter. Gross, right? It was actually really kind of fun. You'd go feed the worms once a week, easy peasy. You give them scraps, vegetable scraps from your garden. You put it in a few days, you just lay it on top. And a few days later, you open the lid and they're gone, completely gone. And what you're left with is stuff that looks like that. It's amazing. Another thing that we will do is I will make tea. So take some of those things and add water to it and soak it in water. And the water that comes out is very nutrient dense. I can use that to fertilize or to water my plants with. So I've added some of that compost in my little hole. I'm going to cover that up here. And for this one, I'm just going to use my hand to tamp it down. And then I would just go down. Some people will use eggshells. I have used eggshells. If you use eggshells, make sure that you dry them first. A lot of people will crack the egg open and use the eggshell while it's still wet inside. You can get the heebie-jeebies. You don't want salmonella or any of, the other kind of pathogens that can come along with things. So what I do is I will either dry them in the sun or I'll just stick them in the oven like at 250 for a few minutes. They'll dry right up and then I grind them. If I have a lot of them, I'll stick them in the Vitamix and whiz them up to a powder. And then I just drop that powder right in. Another thing that you can do in your orchard, a lot of people think about using that kind of stuff in your vegetable garden, but they forget about their apple trees and pear trees and apricot, whatever. Your trees need nutrients too. And if you go along the rain perimeter of your tree, and what I mean by the rain perimeter is when it rains, there's usually like a little circle around the bottom of your tree because right up underneath your tree, it's not getting as wet, right? Because of all the foliage and if you go along the rain perimeter of your tree, you can plant garlic and it will keep the deer away from your apple blossom, your fruit trees. But another thing that you can do is open up a little piece of the earth, literally just dig a hole and drop in some of your compost or literally just scraps from your kitchen that are not composted, scraps. Dump them in the hole, cover the hole. Those earthworms will be singing your praises and they're going to come up and they are going to nibble and munch and they're going to give all sorts of nutrients to the roots of your trees or your bushes, like blueberry bushes and that sort of thing. You can make little holes of compost around there. The earthworms will thank you. I tend to compost most of my kitchen scraps, but the kitchen scraps that I compost are vegetable based. Okay, they're plant based. I don't compost, you know, anything that might have an animal product in it. We don't have a lot of animal products at our house anyway, but we do have guests. We tend to have a revolving door in the summer especially, and they'll bring things in. And I don't allow those things to go in my compost, whether it's meat or butter or any of that stuff. It does not go in my compost. My compost is truly vegan. So I do compost the chicken manure, the horse manure. I'll compost that, but that's in its own compost. It's not with my vegetable. I have a bin, and it has a handle on it. It's a big black bin, and I pour I take the kitchen scraps out and I put it in, and every time I add more scraps, I turn a handle. My compost pile, which is truly just, it's wood like this with 3 sides and one side is open, we literally just turn it. We have a pitchfork that we use and we turn it, and on that goes leaves and grass. Now some people will use things like banana peels, and they will put banana peels in like a mason jar, like several banana peels in a mason jar, and cover it with water and put the lid on and sit it in the sun for a few days, and they'll use that as a fertilizer in their garden. I've never done it. I've toyed with it. I would only do it if I was using organic peels because of some of the things that they can spray. I don't want that sprayed stuff on. I don't buy everything organic. There are some things I will only buy organic, but not everything in our house is organic. But when it comes to my compost is pretty much organic. I don't put my eggshells in my compost bin. I dry them, I grind them down, and I'm probably going to use them right then. And if I don't, then I put that powder in a mason jar. And I'll sprinkle it wherever I'm going to sprinkle it. Great source of calcium, eggshells. Okay, last thing to tell you. Remember we talked about foliar coverage? So when I plant, if I was planting this bed, I would have 3 rows in here. I would have a row, well really 4, because I'd have my marigolds around it. So we don't count the marigolds, right? I would have this row, you know, about right in there. I'd have a row over here, you know, about right in there or so. And then in the middle, I'm going to offset. So this row matches that row in terms of where I plant my seeds. I have a seed here, and a seed here, and a seed here, and a seed here. And that row over there is going to have the exact same spacing. Does that make sense? And between those seeds, in the middle, I'm going to plant another plant. All right?
Theater seating.
Do what?
Theater seating.
There you go. Theater seating, that's right. So I'm going to have 3 rows. The 2 on the outside are going to match, and then the one in the middle is going to be offset. Why would I do that? Spacing. I can actually produce more produce in a smaller space. All right, and it's amazing how much more. I'm forgetting the numbers right now. I'll try to bring that to you next month. It was shocking to me how much more. Why else would I do that?
Less weeds.
What was that?
Less weeds.
Less weeds. Less weeds because of the foliar coverage. Because those plants are going to grow up and they're going to produce foliage, right? That's going to cover the dirt. There's not going to be space in the middle that's just open. There's going to be stuff growing there. I've got the bed, I may as well use it, right? So by having more foliar coverage, by having more leaves that are growing on my plants, which is covering the dirt, the weeds aren't going to be able to grow as much, right? And then once I I plant that, I'm going to put my mulch around it. And when I mulch the whole area. I'm not just mulching right around my plant and then coming here and mulching around my plant and then coming here and mulching around my plant. I put mulch over the whole thing. Does that make sense? Because it helps to prevent those weeds from coming, right? And then as those plants get bigger, they're going to produce bigger leaves, and it's going to cover everything. Now you do have to be careful with that. You don't want to crowd anything, right? Because we learned earlier tonight that crowding can be stressful to the plant. It can stunt the plant and make it not produce as much. So I don't want to crowd it. I'm going to look at my package and I'm going to realize how much spacing I need. So I'm going to make sure I have that amount of spacing, but I'm going to have 3 rows. Right? I'm maximizing the utilization of my space. I'm decreasing the amount of work that I have to do in terms of weeding. So tomatoes, you've seen these cages, you know, that go over things for them to climb. There are all sorts of ways of dealing with that. I hate the cages because our tomato plants get bigger than me. And it gets way bigger than that cage, and then it's coming out, and then the cage is laying on the ground, and then my tomatoes are laying on the ground. It's a problem. So what we have done is for the tomatoes, in the middle of our tomato bed, we have sticks that we put. And then we literally have, it's like chicken wire that we just attach to those sticks. And those tomatoes grow right up that chicken wire, right? And so we're getting lots of air through there. And then I have these little white clips. I'll bring them next month. These little white clips that as a branch, you know, begins to grow and it's kind of getting a little bit too big, I will clip it to the chicken wire. So it's growing up as opposed to out all over everything. Does that make sense? I do the same thing with cucumbers. I will put right in the middle that chicken wire kind of stuff, and the cucumbers will just wind its way all through it. And so then I'm picking cucumbers from here as opposed to down here during the summer. Well, thanks for coming. Thanks for playing. You're welcome.